So corruption in business is one of the first priorities of the Quran in society. There are two things that the Quraysh did that the Quran mostly highlights. One is their shirk, and the other is their economic corruption. What also happens as a result is you don't want competition. You want your competition to be destroyed. So you do everything you can to not just defeat them in sales, but you find other ways to ruin other people's businesses, so you're the only business left. The more powerful you get, the more successful you get in your business, the more you can buy politicians, the more you can buy the police, you can buy corrupt services, and the more influence you have, so the more dhulm you can do. So it's not just that you're getting wealthy, you're getting wealthier and you're getting more powerful at the same time. So what happens to that next generation that they have the power, they have the potential to invent and to be entrepreneurial and to start new things? They have no reason to do it. There's no push. There's no drive, because you have the comfort of the government will come and support me anyway. You know, the young generation is always going to be creative. Allah put that in there. But if they're not using that creativity for business and for engineering and for design and for invention and for good things, if they're not using it for that, then they're going to use it for drugs. Which is why the next generation of Muslims needs to understand the power of business. They need to understand the power of building wealth, the power of building influence through wealth that is guided by Allah Azza wa Jalla. It's guided by Allah. Allah in the earliest surahs of the Quran spoke a great deal about business issues. So if you pay attention to what Allah is saying in some of the earliest surahs, Allah is pointing out corrupt business practices. وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Or when Allah Azza wa Jal talks about those and كَانَ ذَا مَالٍ وَبَنِينَ. Or when Allah Azza wa Jal talks about those who يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينَ. You look at the Meccan Quran and the early surahs that were revealed over and over again, Allah keeps pointing out the wrong that is being done by wealthy business people. So corruption in business is one of the first priorities of the Quran in society. That's what Allah Azza wa Jal highlights, and He does it over and over again. In fact, there are two things that the Quraysh did that the Quran mostly highlights. One is their shirk, and the other is their economic corruption. Those are the two things. And of course, we know that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam even mentioned the power of money so much that there are those who become worshippers of money. Ta'isa abdul dinar wa abdul dirham. The slave of the dinar, the slave of the dirham. So money is so powerful it can become a god. Now, with that as our background, and we'll come back to the Quran at the end, if you look at what capitalism did, and especially in Europe after the Industrial Revolution, in England and in other places, business people were given the free market. So if you start a business and you are successful, you were able to open a factory or whatever else, and you can hire people, you started to make money, you can make as much money as you want. It's a free market. But in capitalism, there's only one God, profit. It's the only thing that matters. How can you make more money? How can this company become more profitable? That's the ultimate objective. And because that's the ultimate objective, how do I pay my employees less? Because the more I pay them, the less profit I make. So I have to make the wages, the salaries lower in order to make more profit. So I have to take advantage of slave labor. I have to take advantage of child labor. I have to take advantage of lower wages, so low that they're so desperate to work for me. If they don't work for me, I'll get 100 other people to work for me cheaper. So out of desperation, people will accept lower and lower and lower salaries. Another thing that happens with capitalism is, well, these materials that for example, if somebody's making food and the ingredients are expensive, well, there are cheaper ingredients available. Those cheaper ingredients may be a little bit poisonous. They may be dangerous for your customer. Who cares? Now we can produce the same food for cheaper price, which means we can make more money. Now you can use poisonous materials inside your paint or inside your construction materials. Now you can use poisonous materials inside your food just because it will make you more profitable. The same way, so wages get destroyed. Construction and materials and ingredients get corrupted. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس Quran talks about this concept. What also happens as a result is you don't want competition. You want your competition to be destroyed. So you do everything you can to not just defeat them in sales, but you find other ways to ruin other people's businesses. So you're the only business left. You're the only one surviving, or they're forced to sell their business over to you one way or the other. And the more powerful you get, the more successful you get in your business, the more you can buy politicians, the more you can buy the police, you can buy corrupt services, and the more influence you have, so the more dhulm you can do. So it's not just that you're getting wealthy, you're getting wealthier and you're getting more powerful at the same time. And because you're getting more powerful at the same time, you don't have to follow the same rules as everybody else. Everybody else has to follow a certain set of rules. And then because you are in a position to control the rules, you create the rules that keep people low and keep you going higher and higher. And then on top of all of that, when people become very wealthy, I won't name the country, but I was in a country where there's a certain family that owns all the chicken. It's an island. They own all the chicken on the island. So every restaurant, every food, every grocery store, when they get their chicken, they get that from this one family. Extremely powerful family. As a result of that, the police is very kind with them because they give, donations to the police department, the fire department, the hospital, the governor, and if anybody tries to give them a hard time, they say, well, we could always move to a different island. We can leave. But if they leave, they're going to lose lots of jobs. They're going to lose the factory. They're going to lose the farms. There's going to be great loss in that society. So everybody backs off and lets them do whatever they want. So they create these kinds of policies. Also, they have an interesting rule. They only marry when they have their daughters, sons, or whatever. They have a rule. They can only marry within their family. There's a reason for that. They need to keep the wealth in a certain circle. They cannot let the wealth go down to any other, because if somebody else marries in that family and one day there's a death, the inheritor will be outside the family too. So the wealth keeps moving into a small group of society and it keeps getting more and more concentrated. So the majority of society starts getting poor because there's only so much money. And if one group of people is making more and more money, then there's less for the rest of everybody else. You understand? That's what capitalism does. And this thing is so powerful. Greed is so powerful that even people who don't believe in Allah, they don't believe in the Akhirah, they don't believe in revelation, they don't believe in wahi, they don't believe in the Quran, even they realize that capitalism is destroying society. So even in Europe, there was a revolution against it. And then they tried to create their own artificial solution to the problem. And so the artificial solution to capitalism, the extreme solution was communism. And another solution was socialism, right? And in these systems, the government owns all the main industries. The government owns the factories. The government owns the majority crop, et cetera, et cetera. And they decide all the salaries. So everybody gets equal salary, or they get a lot of taxes. So nobody gets to become too rich and nobody gets to become too poor. Everybody stays kind of in the middle. So roughly in the middle. Sounds like a good solution, except Allah did not create human beings on that fitrah. Allah made human beings with a desire to explore, to invent, to grow, to find new solutions. But in a society like that, there is no incentive. If you work really hard and become a doctor, you're going to get a salary. And if you don't work that hard and you end up becoming a bus driver, you're going to get almost the same salary. Who cares? I'll just be a bus driver, easier life. I don't have to do harder work. And if I don't do any work, the government will pay for my services anyway. I have free healthcare. I have free education. The government will pay my rent. They'll pay my groceries, etc. So I can just sit in the park and relax. So what happens to that next generation that they have the power, they have the potential to invent and to be entrepreneurial and to start new things? They have no reason to do it. There's no push. There's no drive, because you have the comfort of the government will come and support me anyway. They'll just help me out anyway, so I don't have to do anything. So what happens in that society? The young generation is always going to be creative. Allah put that in there. But if they're not using that creativity for business and for engineering and for design and for invention and for good things, if they're not using it for that, then they're going to use it for drugs. Then they're going to use it for, different kinds of crazy creative activities in the wrong direction. Creativity will go somewhere. If you don't put it in the right direction, it's going to go in the wrong direction. So we find ourselves in a strange situation. We find ourselves on the one hand caught in the trap of capitalism, which is like a cancer. And on the other hand, we're caught in something like a socialism, which in the end is against human nature. Human beings can't function that way overall. It will increase things like depression and anxiety and, unhealthy habits, etc. What does the Quran have to say about all of this? What does Islam have to say about all of this? I told you one of the first concerns the Quran has is economics. One of the first things Allah points out is corruption in economics. So what is the Quran's solution? And what is Islam's solution to this problem that the entire world is facing? First and foremost, Allah Azza wa Jal created a system in which you cannot just make money however you want. There are some things that are haram, which means you cannot involve in them to make money. So you cannot use gambling to make money. You cannot use alcohol and drugs to make money. You cannot use riba to make money. These things that destroy society and corrupt society, you cannot use them to make money. You can't sell, like prostitution and things. You cannot do those things to make your money. So that's one block that's been placed. The second block that's been placed is you can't just sell your customer whatever you want. You can't be mutaffifin. Surah Al-Mutaffifin, I read that in the beginning when Allah said, وَيْلُ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Allah says the worst part of hell is for people who give their customers a little bit less than they deserve, who cheat their customers in a smart way. I'm giving you an easy translation of mutaffifin. If you know how to cheat your customer without your customer realizing it. So you gave them milk, but there's 20% water you added. They didn't notice. They didn't know that's actually, that's a mutaffif. That's a mutaffif. Or a cell phone company says, oh, your bill is 29 or your bill is 100. And then they add a little fine print there, and it becomes 125. And it's actually nothing. It's just print on. It has no meaning. It's actually no service at all. And they increase the bill, right? This is tatfif. These are the mutaffifin. Allah says He puts a stop to the mutaffifin. So if a Muslim is running a business, he cannot be from the mutaffifin because he doesn't want to end up in hell. وَيْلُ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Then on top of that, when wealth increases, Allah put in a system of zakat. Allah put in a system at the time of someone's death that they have to distribute their wealth in inheritance. So what happens when somebody dies? Their daughter gets a little bit, their son gets a little bit, their wife gets a little bit, their father, their mother, their sisters, their brother, everybody gets a piece. Even if they had 1 billion, nobody in the next generation, nobody's a billionaire. Now they became maybe millionaires, but they're not billionaires. And those millionaires, when they die, they distribute it again. And then they distribute it again. So the wealth, instead of staying up in one place, it keeps breaking and breaking and breaking and breaking. What happens over generations? Otherwise, you get 1 or 2 or 3 families, like even in Europe, the United States, Australia, Canada, these Western nations that talk about democracy and the free market and all of these things. And they sell this as, oh, the Muslims are backwards and these third world countries need to learn from us, et cetera, et cetera. In all of those countries, there's maybe 100 families that control most of the wealth. It's the same thing as before. It's not any different because they don't like to let the wealth flow. They like to keep the wealth within a certain group of people. And this is actually something Allah talked about in the Quran when He said, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. In Surah Al-Hashr, Allah even specifically spelled out, Allah is putting certain policies in place so that wealth doesn't go in circles only among rich people. So the billionaire is going to marry his son to the billionaire's daughter over there, and they're going to have a billionaire party, and all the money that was spent between them. It never made its way anywhere down and to anybody else. This is actually what the Quran came to fix. But the purpose of my khutbah was something more. In these last few minutes, I want to share with you something that is normally not highlighted. Allah says in Surah Al-Muzammil. Surah Al-Muzammil is about the ibadah of Allah, especially the highest form of ibadah of Allah, which is tahajjud, it's Qiyam al-Layl. At the end of Surah Al-Muzammil, Allah says, وَآخَرُونَ يَضْرِبُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَبْتَغُونَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. وآخرون يقاتلون في سبيل الله فاقرأوا ما تيسر منه. Allah says that the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to pray more than half the night in tahajjud. More than half the night. But he was not alone. وَطَائِفَةٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ مَعَكَ. There was a group with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, not all the Sahaba, some of them, they used to pray that much also. Okay? In the next ayah, Allah says, عَلِمَ أَن لَّمْ تُحْصُوهُ فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah says, and Allah knows for the rest of the Muslims in Medina, that include the Muhajirin and they include the Ansar, the rest of you cannot do this. You're not all capable of this. Some of you do this with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the majority of you cannot do this. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. So Allah accepted your tawbah. Read whatever you can from the Quran. Read whatever you can from the Quran. Okay. Now Allah made it a little bit easier. So you cannot pray half the night in tahajjud, only pray a couple of rak'ah. It's okay. 5-10 minutes, it's okay. At least you did something. فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Recite whatever is easy for you from the Quran. Then he says, وَآخَرُونَ يَضْرِبُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَبْتَغُونَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. But there are others who are traveling all over the world to pursue Allah's fadl, which means business. Why did people travel back in the day? They would put their items on the camel and they would travel to another qabila, another tribe, and sell their items. And then buy some items and come back and buying and selling, import, export, business. This is what they did. Tijara and business were one thing. Ad-darb fil ard, this is actually isti'ara for tijara. It's an expression for business. So Allah is basically saying, and there are some of you that are business people. They're business people. So you have to travel and you have to worry about security of your camel and you have to go to a new place and you have to earn a halal living, and it's harder for you. You can't even do 2 rak'ah in tahajjud. You can't do that because you're too busy. And then he says, وَآخَرُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And there are others who are fighting in the path of Allah. In the middle of a war, you can't just stop and pray 2 rak'ah. You can't do that. So Allah says there are other exceptions. But which exception did he mention first? يعني ذكر استثناءين. الاستثناء الأول الذي يضرب في الأرض يبتغي من فضل الله التاجر، والثاني المقاتل في سبيل الله، آخرون يقاتلون في سبيل الله. فأي منهما ذكر في الأول في المقام الأول التاجر؟ فقال ابن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه في هذا، the Sahabi who mentions رضي الله عنه about this ayah, he says when death comes, because death will come to all of us. He says when death comes, I only want one of 2 kinds of death. One of them, I die as a shaheed in the path of Allah. Everybody's heard about that one. The second one, he says, I have a donkey and I have my items on the donkey and I'm traveling to a new place to do tijara, to do business, and I die on the way. Because Allah gave awlawiyya to آخرون يضربون في الأرض يبتغون من فضل الله. Then he said to them, فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. Just whatever you can read. Whatever. Why am I bringing this up? I talked to you about capitalism and socialism today. Why am I talking about this ayah? Because Allah has highlighted the importance and the value of good business. There is enough examples of corrupt business in the world. Corrupt pharmaceutical industries, corrupt weapons manufacturers, corrupt social media companies, corrupt technology companies, corrupt AI engines now. There's corruption in almost every industry. The solution is not the destruction of these industries. The solution is the correction of these industries. Until you have the good pharmaceutical industry, the righteous pharmaceutical industry, you cannot replace the corrupt pharmaceutical industry. Until you have the righteous technology companies, the good technology companies, you cannot replace the evil and the corrupt technology companies. Who do you think is going to do that? Those who يَضْرِبُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَبْتَغُونَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. Those who are actually going to engage in business. We can sit there and complain about these billion-dollar organizations and companies and whatever. You will complain about them for the next 100 years or 200 years. That's not going to change anything. You know what will change something? When we become competitors in the marketplace with our principles. We're not the mutaffifin. We're not the ones increasing dhulm. We're not لَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. We're going to run a different kind of business, which is why the next generation of Muslims needs to understand the power of business. They need to understand the power of building wealth, the power of building influence through wealth that is guided by Allah Azza wa Jalla. It's guided by Allah. If you look early in the Quran, Allah never mentioned that it's evil to be wealthy. He said it's evil to be corrupt with your wealth. It's a big difference. And even later on in the Quran, study all of the Sharia, almost all of the ahkam in the Quran will require you to have wealth. How are you going to give zakat if you don't have wealth? How are you going to give wasiyah if you don't have wealth? How are you going to give sadaqah if you don't have wealth? Who's going to spend in the path of Allah? When we hear about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu giving so much sadaqah, where did that sadaqah come from? It came from tijara. When Uthman radiallahu anhu gives, when Umar, where's all their wealth coming from? It's coming from tijara. So even the mission of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was supported by ethical, principled people who were doing business. Now think of it one more way, and I'll conclude this khutbah. I live a good part of my year in the United States, and I've been to many Muslim minority communities, France, all over Europe and Australia, Canada, America, other places. And I see masajid are built, and I see sometimes Islamic schools are built, charity organizations are built on the backs of who? Who is giving the major donations to these masajid that are built in the middle of New York, that are built in the middle of Sydney? Where's that money coming from? It's coming from the business community. It's coming from the restaurant owners. It's coming from the tire shop people. It's coming from the real estate people. It's coming from business people. They're the ones that are actually doing the work and then putting it and then spending on building Islamic institutions. But you know what? Those same business people, if they don't have the right guidance, if you own a restaurant but you don't have the right guidance, then you won't know the difference. Your principles may not be different from the mutaffif that I talked about before. So the money that you're putting into the ummah, the money that you're putting into the masjid may also become corrupt. So one of our biggest priorities is to actually guide businesses, to help businesses flourish and to help businesses live up to ethical principles. One last concern I will share with you. I've been in business for a long time, 20 years. And I've done business with many people, different contracts, services, partnerships, etc., etc. And the only time I have ever been cheated or stolen from or lied to is by Muslims. I've done business with non-Muslims. I've done business with atheists. I've done with Christians, other people. And I've done business with good Muslims also. But the only time anyone's ever stolen something or lied or cheated, always been Muslim. Always been Muslim. And that's a reality. We have to face that reality. If we say we have to build a Muslim economy, we cannot build a Muslim economy if we can't even trust each other. That can't happen. If the normal thing among the young people here is to lie on their resume, that's the normal thing. If the normal thing is to say, inshallah, next week, I'll pay you next week, inshallah, right? And then stab your brother in the back. If that's the normal, then this entire conversation has no purpose. It has no purpose. Because the way that we do business is the same way that Allah was criticizing the business of the kuffar when the Quran was first revealed. Then Islam is just in a name. It's not enough to have Islam, that we have masajid and we have salah and we have dhikr. When Islam shows up in our businesses, that's when we're going to have Islam. That's when you're going to see real Islam. The barakah of that money, the barakah of that business, the barakah of the people that are earning from that, their families, that community, Allah will take them to a different place. Allah will elevate them. لو أنهم أقاموا التوراة والإنجيل, Allah says about the previous people, if they only lived by Tawrat and Injil, لأكلوا من فوقهم ومن تحت أرجلهم. They would have eaten from above and below. The earth would have opened its treasures, the sky would have opened its treasures. That's the sunnah of Allah. If we live by Allah's principles, people think if they cheat, they will make more money. I can guarantee you, you might make money temporarily, you will live a cursed life. You will live a cursed life. And if you can live by principles, you might make less in the beginning, but the way Allah will open those doors, من حيث لا يحتسب, from where you couldn't imagine. I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal opens up the rizq for the ummah, and it makes us a people of principled business, and actually helps us understand what is it that we need to do, even as individuals, to bring about a positive change in the ummah. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayati.